We're talking about resource management. All right, Charles, what's the bit for today?
I don't know.
I don't have anything either. It's like my creativity is just missing. How are we supposed to get our creativity back?
Let me consult our rule book.
Yeah, I don't think it's in there.
No.
All right. Welcome to One's Tabletop, where we did not manage the amount of creative energy we had, and now we're just going to have this, I guess. I'm Frank, GM of 10 years, and with me is Charles.
I'm sorry.
Can I have my... Thank you. I need that for the one shot we're going to film. But tell them about the one shot, Charles.
Hey, so you guys voted on our... Sorry. You guys had voted on... Where am I blanking at? Good Lord.
Oh, we're really out of the resources.
Sorry.
We have a one shot coming up you guys voted on, and thank you guys so much. It's coming out soon.
Yeah.
Oh,
Leave that in there.
Oh, 100%.
How dare you?
You think we're joking, but it's okay because we're not.
If only I had control over editing.
We're going to talk about resource management and the many different ways you can do it. Specifically, we're talking about resource management, right? Not like the ways you can use it. So like metacurrency, if that's what you're looking for, that's a different video. You can check that one out. But this is more specifically on like gaining resources, losing resources, the 5 different ways. Ooh, that's the thumbnail, possibly. The thumbnail. Good grief.
We are hitting all the marks today, guys.
Don't worry. We have a means of talking about how to justify that in your game. Feel free to steal these 5 possible ideas.
Yes.
But first, like, comment, subscribe. Tell us all the things that we're doing wrong, including that this bit is not a bit. It's just real life.
Join our Discord, please, and tell us even more so we have access to us directly to be like, you guys don't know what you're doing, and we know.
Yeah. And our Patreon is always there. We have a special bonus video, just us talking about whatever the heck we want. It's called We're Friends, We Promise. That's what we're calling that series.
That's great.
That's the first time Charles heard that name, but it's true. And you can watch it on Patreon right now. That means you, Chris. Go watch it right now. Anyway, Charles, what are we talking about?
So today we're going to be talking about resources and resource management.
Do you have any interest in this?
I do, because in the game that we're developing, we have an interesting take on some resource management.
Yeah, that's the 5th one, because we want you to stay to the end and see what special, unique flair we did, which most likely has already shown up in some other games. So it's unique to us at the very least. But there's 5 different methods that I've found that people do for resources when it comes to tabletop RPGs. And so maybe you're like, there's only one method, Frank. What are you talking about? How can you make however long video this is justifying that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about.
You wait and see. We will justify the out of it. Yeah.
What?
I don't know.
Oh, man. Okay, let's see if we can get this creativity back. Let's start with the first methodology, sir.
We have what most RPGs do is decreasing over time. You use resources.
You have X amount of resources. As the game wears on, you use that resource to do a thing, and you use it more and more, and then eventually you get to a point where you're going to have to stop and take a break and then gain all those resources back, only to keep using them more and more. So this is most associated with Dungeons & Dragons, obviously. Yeah. Like literally every single resource in Dungeons & Dragons is just decreasing over time, right? Rage. You have spell slots is the very obvious one. HP, which is a resource in that regard. You get it all, and then as you take hits, you lose it. Occasionally you'll gain it, but that's more mitigating damage than it is like resource management to that extent. I guess you could just make an argument that healing and health is resource management, but not if you use wounds, right, Peter? So as a player, right,
yes. How
do you feel about decreasing over time? Like, is it something you think about?
I feel as though it's just like standard. It's like pretty basic. And again, you can't you can't go wrong with this, you know, kind of attitude. So like anyone who uses it, I'm like, it feels natural because it's what you're used to.
There is some tactical necessity of this, of knowing I have X amount of times I can do something and then I can spend it over time. I will say what's interesting is, depending on the game, and if you're not careful, this is like the downside of decreasing over time, is you can have players who are like, oh, I have this amount of uses. Well, I know we happen to have this many encounters where that use is important. Therefore, I can use this thing X amount of time. Basically, it's called going Nova, where you use all of your resources in one encounter to just win automatically, and then your GM's like, well, that was the one encounter I had planned for today, so I guess that's all you need to do, and then that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, it can get kind of bland sometimes, though, I think, too. Sometimes it's nice. I mean, again, like you said, there's a tactical thing about it where you kind of have to know your resources, what you have, what's available, and then when and where you can use them at.
And so we're going to go into the second one already, which is increasing. Yeah, that's right. So this is popular with currently Draw Steel, where the way they kind of do it is they have you pick a class, and some of the classes are order classes and some of the classes are chaos classes. What that means is the amount of resources you start with is, if it's an order class, it's always the same no matter what. If it's a chaos class, you roll for it. And so there's some fun to be had there. But ultimately what happens is, as the game keeps going, right, as you go into round 2, 3, 4, 5, you're not losing resources. You're gaining resources. What this does is it prevents a slog. So if you aren't familiar, a slog is when you reach a point in the battle where you're like, there's no way, like, we've run out of resources. There's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
And the enemy can't kill you either. So there's no way you can defeat the enemies, and there's no way the enemies can defeat you in a timely fashion.
Stalemate.
So you slog it out. It's not a stalemate. A stalemate implies that you're both equal.
Okay,
a
fair.
slog means you guys will eventually win.
Got it.
But it's going to take some time.
It's an uphill battle type thing, yeah.
Yeah, so like there's, for example, fighting like any big monster in later levels of most like Dungeons and Dragons games. It can get to a slog if everyone's Nova'd, and then that wasn't enough. And now it's like, okay, we hit him with our sword. All right, that was my turn. All right, I hit him with my wand. All right, that was my turn. I hit him with my bow. Okay, that was my turn. How much was that? 13? Okay, we'll keep going. Right, that's a slog.
I see what you're saying.
So increasing over time avoids a slog because you're gaining resources as the battle goes on, and usually having more of those resources gives you access to more abilities. So let's say you have you're playing a tactician, and you have, I think it's called focus. Basically, you have one focus, meaning you can do this ability. But when you have two focus, it means you can do this ability. Okay. When you have three focus, it means you can do this ability, right?
So there's a range of what you can do. So like focus level 1, basically, we'll call it. You can do these things, and then but if you gain more focus over time, you can do a bigger and additional things.
Right. And obviously some games have a similar version to this when it comes to decreasing over time, right? Sentinel's comics, we talked about that one where like your health, as it decreases, you get access to more abilities, right? So this is an additional thing you can do regardless of either of the two you want. And it is something to think about in regards to that. Decreasing over time is something you don't always necessarily have control over. Right. So like with Sentinels, you don't have control over you losing health. So you don't have control over when you gain access to those abilities, versus something like Draw Steel. Again, you also still don't have control over it, but you can at least predict it a little bit more because you're like, oh, by round 3, I get this ability. So I know that can happen. And they've tried to make sure that like, okay, you're not just farming, right? Because that's another thing that can happen with increasing over time is basically XP grinding in a sense, where it's like, we're going to stay in this fight. We could end it, but in 3 more rounds, we get this thing. And then that allows us
So you're just kind of postponing until you get what you want.
That is a possibility, and you got to be careful about that. Now, there's an interesting kind of both versions of this put together, and that's what Peter kind of does with his barbarian. So if you're not familiar with Peter from Tales from Elsewhere, he had done Get Barbaric, and he made a barbarian subclass for 5th edition, or a barbarian reworks. And the big thing is there, rage is once you take damage, you gain rage, and then that allows you to have access to cool abilities, and then you can spend rage to do additional damage and stuff like that. So it's a very interesting give and take back and forth, where it's like, okay, I'm gaining resources, and then I'm choosing, do I lose them or do I keep the benefits that come with it?
Again, it makes sense. It prevents, again, you never want to slog in a battle, because he also had a video about that where he talked about, you want 3 rounds max. So again, managing your resources and having them available when you need them, again, it makes the most, making it make sense is what I feel like makes the game run smoother. Yeah,
and this is called the ebb and flow model. This is our third method of resource we're talking about. And I noticed it in Daggerheart, surprisingly.
Daggerheart, yes.
Right. So this is, again, a combination of the two. But the idea is you're constantly gaining and losing resources so much, you basically never run out of resources, but the amount you have is still important. So, for example, in Daggerheart, you get these things called Hope, which every time you roll with hope, regardless of if it's a success or a failure, you as the player gain a hope. And so then you get to do cool stuff with your abilities. Sometimes it's activating a domain card. Sometimes it's activating a specific class ability. Most of them are worth 1 hope. Some abilities are worth 3 hope. And that's where it becomes interesting with the ebb and flow. So you can only ever have a max of 6 hope at one time. And considering how often you're rolling, that means 50% of the time you're rolling, you're gaining a hope. But the whole point of the hope and fear mechanic is that you have a cap.
Yeah.
And so you never want to, like, there's no point in holding on to all of your resources.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's like having 6 like means like now I'm gaining hope that I could have used later, right?
Yeah, you're consistently using your hope because since there's a cap on it, you can only use so much of it.
Like and because it happens so often, it's like you have unlimited hope, but because of the different things, it's still important to keep track of hope. Because if you're like, I want to do a tag team roll, which costs 3 hope, but you only have 2, that's important to remember and know.
Absolutely.
But again, like you will eventually be able to get to there. It's not guaranteed, like with Durasteel, where you're increasing over time, which is where like the benefit or the disadvantage can come to it. But again, with like how Peter's reworking works, you can have it be consistent over time, but you're spending it to do things.
Right.
And so ultimately with the ebb and flow, you just want to make sure that like whatever resource you're generating, whatever you're doing with that, you want to make sure it's constant, right? And it's the same with like the GM sphere.
Right.
They have 12 because you're having 4 players rolling fear. So you're, or however many players you have rolling fear. So you're more likely to gain and lose more of it, but it's still a constant thing. You don't want to hoard the resources because there's no benefit to hoarding it.
So yeah, so we've talked about, the ebb and flow, increasing, decreasing. What about shared resources?
Right. So shared resources is this idea that instead of it being, this is mine, and that's yours, and we all have our own little things, it's pulling them together and saying, this is for the group. And that group can be just the player characters, or it could also include the GM. And we have 2 examples of both situations happening there.
So the first one is Fallout, which I had the pleasure of running for a handful of sessions.
Yeah.
Again, when Frank's a playable character, he kills every game.
Thanks, man. You didn't have to say that 2 videos in a row, but I appreciate it.
We love you, Frank.
So the thing in Fallout is you have basically a resource in the middle, and I'm forgetting the exact name of it, but it's basically additional dice you can roll. Because in Fallout, you roll 2d20 and you're trying to roll under. Now, sometimes you need a certain amount of successes, and you can roll multiple successes per die. But obviously, by rolling an additional die, it increases your chance of success.
Right.
And so what this does is you have a shared resource where you're like, I'm going to spend one of the shared resource and add 1 extra die to this roll. And then, depending on how many successes over the target number I get, adds resources back into the shared pool. And this is shared between everybody. This isn't just mine. This is the group's. And so it becomes a group decision at that point where it's like, hey guys, I could do really good at this thing. If you let me use 1 resource, I could generate more. And now we're at 5 rather than the 2 that we were at before.
You're using it, but again, you're sharing it. So you have to make sure the people you're playing with are like, okay, that's cool, but I was going to do this. So, and also I believe it maxes out too at a certain, I cannot remember the.
Yeah, it's 6, I believe.
6, yeah.
Yeah, regardless of player count, which is an interesting thing. That's the big thing you're going to want to keep in mind of is it going to change based on player count? And if so, by how much? And that's unfortunately where like the math's going to have to come into play. So if you're not a math person, we talked about this in our Discord.
Yeah.
We found that there are the people who really like the math side of RPGs and the people who really don't. And hopefully you find each other and make it work, or you just watch our videos and hopefully we try to help you out in that regard.
And I feel like that's what we've done. We found each other.
Yeah, well, I'm also both. So
yeah, that's true. You are both. So
I'm the weird person who breaks all personality quizzes.
He thinks.
But yeah, that's the idea there. There is another way you can do it where the shared resource includes the GM. And this is, we found in the Star Wars Destiny Points game.
So Destiny Points is a shared resource that you use it's actually shared between the players and kind of the GM a little bit. There's light side and dark side. The dark side, the GM uses to have certain things happen, and the light side, the players use. But again, those light sides are shared between the multiple players that are playing.
Right, and the important thing to note is with this is whenever you spend a light side point, it becomes a dark side point.
Yes.
It's similar to the ebb and flow a little bit, where you're kind of going back and forth, but you have a lot more control over the ebb and flow. And obviously it's very thematic for Star Wars of like the Force being like a balance,
right?
And you're it's on the light side, but then suddenly it becomes all dark side, and then like the back and forth that can happen there. And
it's important to know that it doesn't make sense to hoard it either. Like, oh well, I don't want to give the GM any dark side, so we're gonna keep it all. Like, it doesn't make sense to do that because it makes things a slog, actually.
Yeah.
Because then you're just having all these things, all these resources that you could be using to help you do certain things, and you're not doing them. So it makes sense to use them as necessary.
Yeah, and then you also have some abilities that require, especially if you're using the Force, requires you to spend light side or dark side points, which I definitely think is where that system really works.
Right.
Now, obviously, depending on your character's morality determines do you use light side or dark side points. And so You could game it.
Right.
You could be an evil person who uses the dark side because you know it's the GM's resource. So you're never, if you have one person who's on the dark side and one person who's on the light side, you could be like, we always have a chance to. That being said, I don't know how many tables would be able to get past the cognitive dissonance of being like, you're a Sith and I'm a Jedi, but we're in the same party.
Well, what I love is when we played and Jeffrey just trying his hardest to play the line, but he kept leaning to the dark side. It's like, but no, I'm like, no, it's dark side stuff you're doing, dude.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing too, because they've gamified morality, which is a very interesting way to do it. Yeah. But we're not talking about that. We have talked about the downside of this kind of a system, which is that the players could all decide we're going to just hoard it. Who cares if that means we don't have anything? That means the GM doesn't get to use it. Hopefully that's not the only resource the GM has.
Right.
Like you could even give the GM abilities where like monsters can turn light side points into dark side points, or however you want to do that specific resource management, to where like the GM has a little bit more control over how it works. But again, as a GM, you also don't want to hoard it, because ultimately this is a storytelling game. Exactly. And so you want it to be a back and forth, right? That's why like the fear and hope is a little bit better version of that, where it's a tied together resource, but no one's in control of how it's generated.
Correct. And you have that cap as well. I mean, you have a cap on the other one as well, but it's, again, you have to, there are too many mechanics in the game that make you use the fear and hope, mechanics. Right. So
that brings us to the fifth kind of resource. And this is one I haven't seen any RPGs do. We call this resource debt.
Resource debt.
Yeah. So the main way this came about was, I think we were just playing some game and I was like, what would be cool is if when you get to zero, being like, no, I'm not at zero. I'm going to borrow resources from the future. And so you go into the negative rather than just staying at zero. Right. So let's say I have stamina allows me to do actions or whatever. And now I'm running low. It's like, oh man, I could spend 3 stamina to do this really cool thing, but I only have 1. Well, now with resource debt, it means you get to do that thing. You get to do that really cool thing despite the fact that you only have 1 resource, but it's going to come at a cost.
Right. So once combat is over, you can't use that resource anymore, and you can't regenerate it without doing a specific thing.
Yeah, so the idea comes into effect where it's like almost a little bit like Deal with the Devil, or like taking from the bank. But it's like, okay, cool, now you owe us. And so where normally you could like regain however many resources just by resting, by being in the negative, it means no, actually, you don't get to do that. And now you're like permanently hurt, right? This is like pushing yourself too far. Yeah. Like we've all done that before, where it's like, maybe you're working out for the first time, or you're running and you're like, I've never ran as far as I just did. And now, my muscles are like, I'm feeling it the next day. 'Cause like I did not know I could go that far. Right. And that's kind of like what we're talking about here, is like that feeling of like, I pushed myself, and now I need to like not just rest, I need to do additional things in order to even get back to zero before I can regain all of that.
I thought it'd be cool to incorporate into our game, because there's a lot of opportunity for you to do that. I want to do this thing, but I'm running out of this resource. I'm going to go into debt. So I know I'm going to have to do something extraordinary basically to get this back, but right now it makes sense to do it. So
yeah, and obviously the downside is, because we have it where it's like once you go into debt, you can still keep taking from it. It's not like once you go into the negative, once you're cut out.
Correct.
In that entire encounter, you can keep going into the negative, but once you've finished the encounter, now you're stuck in the negative, and there's no way to get back to zero until you've done a role-playing task.
Correct.
So obviously the negative part is you can go so far into the negative that it's like, well, I'm never going to get out of it. Now, we will have systems in place, and we're still fleshing it out. So obviously this is a work in progress, but we'll have systems in place where it's role-playing opportunities that get you back to zero, and then you just take a rest, and that's how you regain the points that way. And so that allows for like, okay, I'm not so far in the negative that it means nothing, basically. Like I'm so far in the negative, I'm never going to have this resource again.
Right.
Instead, it means like, you're so far in the negative, you went from having to have surgery to you got to go find somebody to make a deal with who has the power to heal you back up to normal.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the idea that we're playing with.
And I think the idea for us too right now, we're looking to getting you just back at zero, and then you'd have to do the normal resting, whatever the requirement is to build that resource back up. So I like that we're using a narrative consequence versus, luck of the die. I think that's a fair way to play it.
Yeah, and that's something we're looking into even with like our health system, where like once you've hit a certain amount of resolve or health. You have a choice of just being knocked out or pushing through, but there's the consequence that comes with that. And that's the big thing that we want with our game, is like a lot of player choice of like,
Yes.
okay, maybe you didn't manage your resources properly, but we're not going to penalize you yet.
Yes.
We're not going to have a slog happen because you have one resource when you need 3. No. We'll let you go into debt for it. But now there's a narrative cost of like, you're at -3 smarts. What are you going to do in order to gain back to 0?
Do you get a lobotomy, baby?
I don't think that's going to be an option. I mean, unless you want to do that.
That was a joke. Yeah, well, you and I will toss ideas around. We'll talk in with our play group. We'll toss ideas around. So.
Yeah, but I like the idea of it's more like it's up to GM discretion, right? Like how wounds work. With wounds, it's not that you just have a wound and it's a wound. It's you flavor it, and depending on the situation that happens. So like, you could be in a situation where it's like I ran out of scream. It's like, okay, you just have to like as a werewolf go back to your tribe land and like partake in the ceremony of the wolves or whatever.
Exactly. I like that idea of having to make it a journey basically to especially when going into the negatives, making it like, because normally we just have our resources stacked back up. It's something like it's more like communal type thing depending on what the resource is. It's like you took a long break, whatever we're calling it, or you went out and socialized, you did something fun, you gambled, whatever. Kind of like how Blaze of Dark does it.
A rest could literally just be like, you're decompressing.
Yeah,
and that's how you gain that back.
Yeah.
But when you get into the negative, now it's actually like seeking something out, and that might be a quest rather than just like and this is what I do in my off time.
Yeah, I could see like certain things becoming like a big hindrance, to the player character until they get this thing accomplished, and even while they're trying to accomplish it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and so tell us what's wrong with that system if you don't like it in the comments below. Or tell us any unique ways you use resource management. Because I think there's a lot of unique ways you can actually use it. Granted, I think most people will default to decreasing over time, which is nothing wrong. No. By the way, we're not saying that that's the bad one. We're just saying that's the most commonly used.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that too. Again, it's a very fine way to do resources. It's like, here are your resources, use them as you will, and you only get them back after this time. And again, any of the things we use is fine. I think the only one you can truly abuse is probably the increasing over time.
No, I would say with increasing over time, you're not able to abuse it. The intent is strategy.
Yeah.
If you're doing increasing over time, you're saying like, I want my players to know when you hit round 3, this is how many resources you have.
Gotcha.
It's the foreknowledge of it. Knowing every time I get hit, I'm taking 1 damage is more tactical than knowing every time I get hit, I could take however much damage, right? At that point, it's a little bit more random.
I get what you're okay, yeah.
I do find it funny that what we're kind of saying is like, hey, power gamers, if you play our game and you power game too hard, you are forced to roleplay.
Yeah, take that, non-role players.
I have no idea if they would even play our game. Who knows? Maybe.
Yeah, I know everyone plays TTRPGs for their own thing. Some people just love the combat. Some people love just being around people. Some people love the roleplay. Yeah. I'm fine with all of that stuff.
As am I. And hopefully you are as well. Thank you guys for joining us. Like, comment, subscribe. Discord, yell at us in the Discord. We already know many of the people in our Discord yell at us, specifically about not playing Mouse Guard.
Join our Patreon. We have a YouTube membership as well.
And as always, do we gain our creativity back after podcasting? Oh, we're going to roll for it. This is how you can tell we didn't gain it back.
We get 5 resources back.
Stay witty. That's all I can do.
Stay witty. So many syllables we get.